Hi guys, hello everybody. We're here on time actually, and today we have post-mortem here with Chris Kaleki for the final playtest before early access. All right, so as always, we'll go through a little presentation with the post-mortem for the last playtest that we had, and at the end we'll have an AMA session with Chris, so you guys can prepare your questions. We do have some pre-prepared questions ourselves from the playtest. If you guys filled in the survey, we had a field where you can ask a question, and we picked the five top asked questions, very hot questions actually. And yeah, after that, we'll open the floor. So if you guys have any questions, you can prepare them, and we'll get you on stage so you can ask Chris whatever you want. So for today, we have what do we have? So we can start off with some player feedback. So Chris, you can take the stage.
Yeah, so we've done a number of these now, and so after each play test, and kind of we do a survey, and we see some of the results. More and more, it gets very sort of similar, and the classes sort of bounce around in terms of how you guys perceive them as being powerful or fun. Which we kind of think is a good thing. There's no one class that's like a standout that everyone doesn't like or doesn't think is powerful, etc. But this time there was some balance changes that we did for the rogue, where we made stealth cost energy instead of have a longer cooldown, and we knew this was going to be a rough landing a little bit, just to kind of experiment. Let's kind of see how that would go. And yeah, it was probably a little too good, and so I'll probably put like some sort of cooldown on it. Kind of the goal with having it have energy instead of a cooldown is just that energy is really the resource that regulates cooldowns, and so in theory they should all kind of cost cooldowns, but or sorry, cost energy, not have a long cooldown. But there's some other examples, or uh some examples where maybe that doesn't work, or some cases where that doesn't work. So anyway, we're going to massage that, make sure it feels good, but then is balanced, of course. And so we're going to do some changes there for the next for EA release, really. um, and then the hunter couldn't kick or trap. That was like a bug with the interaction system. There's like a little things there that probably added to this mix. Priest is also, as players become more sophisticated with all the class tools, some of hers could also use cooldowns like the shield and stuff like that, the prayer car shield. So we're going to make some adjustments there. Probably maybe turn it to more of an absorption mechanic rather than it being kind of basically like a block. We kind of thought that was interesting and cool when we made it, and there is something cool about that, but there does have some challenges to balance there. But anyways, we'll address that. And the warrior is usually the feedback that we get with the warrior is that he's a lot of fun, but solo PvE can be challenging, at least in the beginning. But once you get some of these other traits that we built, that like regenerate wound over time, or you gain more armor when you're enraged. There's another one too. When you enrage, you get absorption mechanic on you, basically, which I think once you become higher level and kind of that sort of thing, it feels pretty good. So we just kind of have to figure out how to improve it in the beginning, so that's more consistent, which is maybe we can shift some of the traits around, that sort of thing. But anyways, very kind of surgical, smaller things, I think, with some of the classes. One thing that we have been doing the last, in between when we cut this build and when it went live, is like improving just general UX, just general kind of feel of combat, and just some of the animation timings, these sort of things. So you'll see a little bit more of that, like them getting like feel more weightier and more responsive, and that sort of thing over time, which we have seen with the game. If for any of you who have joined us, even like a year ago, it improves all the time. So anyway, that's kind of a long-winded take of just some of the class feedback stuff that we saw.
And also, now that we've had our final playtest, What are some of the project priorities going into early access? Is the team focusing on?
Yeah, we were really encouraged to hear some feedback from players that they felt like performance was improving and these sort of things. Of course, there were some bugs in there just because we're introducing some new features like the ossuary that we feel like we've ironed out now. We're also going to make the ossuary and some of these other things a little more intuitive in the UI and better progress bar and stuff like that. And we've continually been doing a lot more performance improvements, optimizations, basically performance is essentially, optimizing all the assets so they're not like, chugging your CPU or GPU, these sort of things. And so it just kind of takes manual time to go through them and to improve them. So that's continually underway, and more of that is going to expect more and more of that to come in. Anyway, that is our main priority is like fixing bugs, polishing UI UX improvements. You'll see some, one thing we notice, I think someone streaming was, when you or one of our friends who are playtesting when they return to main menu when you open up like the pause menu or the context menu, and it just leaves the session abruptly. So we did little things like, "Hey, are you sure you really want to leave the map and go back to the main menu?" So like little things like that, I think will improve, especially for newer players. And then the other big things that we're focusing on again and again in the feedback, this one was no different in the survey, is just uh, better ways to onboard new players, just give them safe space to like learn the game, which is this tutorial farm map. We really tried to get that in this last play test, but it wasn't quite ready yet. But we are going to have it for EA release, and so that's a big thing that the whole team is working on right now. And then there's this intro campaign quest line, which you are sent basically quests from Stonehaven, the city that you're theoretically in the HUD or in hub menu. And they're just going to send you a bunch of quests to like go do the tutorial, to extract once, to do all these sort of things, and it will teach you how to play the game. So if you do that campaign, you get kind of a grand tour of the game. And we probably take like an average, normal player, not like most of our play testers who are kind of hardcore, but it'll take an average player like I don't know a couple days to do probably. And then at the end, the last quest is to kill Morgthog as well. So actually, yeah, may take a little bit. And then the reward for this quest line, by the way, is juicy once an epic bag, like an epic container. Your inventory container, not the stash one, but the one you carry in your back. So it'll be funny to see how many of these, unfortunately, could drop. Like from it'll be a risky thing to take in. And then yeah, we're improving loot and spawning. You met Colin, I think, last Meet the Devs, or it was the one before, I
It was
can't
two
remember,
ago.
and Tessa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they are going through the map and improving spawn locations for loot and then also for creatures, and so that will feel better too at EA release. And then we also have something what we call a how to play screen. So you hit this like UI button on the bottom, and if anyone played Valve's Deadlock, they have something where you learn to play, and it's like this little UI. It has these little videos, and so we have something very similar. And so for new players, you can kind of look at that and understand the various systems and stuff of the game, kind of like a little like cheat sheet, I guess, for playing a game. So yeah, looking forward to your feedback once that goes live as well to see if there's anything in there that you think should be in there. And then we're hard at work working on future content like the wizard that we've talked about before a little bit, and the crypt map, which is a second map that we're going to put, or maybe the third after the farm tutorial. And then just more and more progression and more content. I think one thing that was in the survey that I think is more and more louder each time is like, yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's just it would be great to have more content and stuff like that, which, it's probably the best kind of feedback result we can get is just that things feel pretty good and just about more content. So good news is we're all working on that right now. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I think with the tutorial map and the how to play screen is probably gonna hopefully be enough to help a lot of the new players in. Again, everyone that's here already right now probably would know most of these things, but if you remember in the beginning, we were doing a very good job of explaining how the game is like all the little intricacies of the game. I think it's gonna help a lot. Oh wow, okay. We're moving right into the Q&A. So these are the top five most. Did I miss anything? I didn't miss anything, right? That's it. All
No,
right.
I think that's it.
All
That's
right.
it. Yep.
Questions. So the number one most asked question was, when is early access? When is it?
We've alluded before that it was going to be pretty early in 2025. And when we announced at the OTK Expo too, we mentioned, yeah, it'd be pretty early this year. So it is coming up quick. And so yeah, we're announcing today it's going to be on February 12th. Is when early access will be released. So we're wrapping up these last remaining kind of systems and gameplay, and then we're going to go into early access. And then shortly after that, probably, within hopefully like 3 months or so, we'll do another patch with more content in it. And so, yeah, we're here. So we feel pretty good. For the players who've been with us for a long time, where we started, and there's a lot of work that took to get here. And then we have some marketing plans as well. So I've been doing some interviews with traditional media, and then there'll be some other surprises to come out at release. Um, yeah, one thing we also can announce too is just that the base price of the game is going to be $24.99. There's going to be two other editions after that we're putting some little goodies in there for fans, and so we'll announce the prices and what's going to be in that shortly, probably at least next week or something like that.
Okay. Well, yeah, this was the big announcement. Early access releases February 12th, 2025. Next question.
There it is.
It's gonna be tough to beat that question. How do you plan to balance classes? This is like a really hot question. I don't know if perfect balance is ever possible. I feel like it's gonna be a back and forth, and the playtesters and the people playing the game are gonna. The feedback is like super important, and that's how we do it. But yeah, what is your take on it?
We get asked this question usually each time. There was a lot of questions that had to do about, how are you going to tune this mechanic or these sort of things. And, like I mentioned, some of the things about, say, the rogue stealth cooldowns or the priest prayer card, these are all solvable, tunable things. We're not really super concerned about that. But we will be balancing classes. Um, um, uh, Essentially, I mean, the way that you kind of balance classes, you just have some sort of core experience that you really want them each to achieve. You're never really going to have everything completely balanced, and it's more important if it's fun and feels somewhat fair than really like balance per se. But yeah, so we'll be doing balance changes and updates in between. So the first season, which we'll probably call season 0 after early access release, will be that one we may do like a quick balance patch after that, but generally we'll try to kind of keep things, let them be between the seasons, and then each season will include a lot of different balance changes and improvements. So you've met a lot of the team now through the Meet the Devs, Troy and Andre and Skylar, etc. And each of us all kind of distribute work on different classes, and so we all check the Discord and the community, and we play the game a lot. And so the work is sort of distributed between us, and there's advocates for all the classes on the team as well. So it's a really great environment to do game design and to do class balance. So yeah, and we all kind of know in the community as well, just some of you who main different classes, and that's really useful, and really appreciate everyone's feedback as well. So
Yeah, we definitely went through cycles where every class was at some point the best class and it was considered overpowered. So it was constantly changing. And yeah, the feedback from you guys is invaluable for sure. Question number 3. Are there going to be ranked systems, guilds? So I guess this is referring to just systems beyond just the regular game loop of getting gear, stuff like ranked, like PvP ranked or guilds or yeah. Any thoughts on that for early access?
Yeah, so for early access, we're not going to have guilds just yet. It is a planned feature that's been sort of designed and discussed and planned on the team. And so it is something we're going to be working on. It's one of the ones I really wish we could have gotten for EA or sooner, just because social systems are some of my favorites. And it is really important, I think, to the game. And it would be a differentiating feature, I think, because none of the to my knowledge, not a lot in the genre or even in extraction games or our type of game have them. But yeah, so we do plan on having that during early access. We'll be building that out. We do want to have like a leaderboard, and so the leaderboard will have essentially ranks right out of players, so you can kind of see, you know, who is the top of different classes or these sort of things, or gatherers even maybe. So really excited about that too. That'll be something we'll be building out during early access. But yeah, I thought a lot about actually this wipe or this alpha about like kind of that end game loop and kind of what the player will be doing and how we kind of introduce more difficult content and that sort of thing. And yeah, we have a pretty good plan. I'm excited about, one thing we really want to do is like a night version of Greenwood. And so thinking through like what if the night version is just kind of like what Greenwood is, but then has some different harder creatures and then changes like the environmental interaction a bit. And then, that's kind of like a hard tier version of the map basically. And so I love that model of having like days and nights of different maps and creating content that way, trying to be scrappy about it, because it's always a challenge to make new maps, just because one, the production cost of it, but also just it's a lot for the player to learn, and more maps generally aren't really better. But then this gives us a way that you use the knowledge you learned about Greenwood in a different sort of experience. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of plans here and we're already building it out. And so yeah, we just have to getting through early access and getting out there would be a great milestone. And then after that, we can start building that out.
Yeah, it would be interesting to play in a nighttime Greenwood with the because then some spells, for instance, the pre spells would also be used to maybe illuminate the area. Maybe it would be even people are complaining now when rogues have perma stealth. Imagine perma stealth at nighttime. It's gonna be interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways, all the classes have some sort of stealth because perhaps the visibility is lessened. So,
Yeah.
you know, um,
All right,
yeah.
next question we have is what steps are being made to optimize performance, improve combat mechanics, fix issues with cheesing bosses? That's a three question. So yeah.
Yeah, I kind of clustered a lot of the questions in this one. Really, it's a lot of things are being done on each of these individually. Performance again is a lot of manual kind of going through each asset and making sure it's optimized and feeling good and isn't chugging people's performance. One of the areas in the map that wasn't the best optimized that we have done some adjustments to address was if you went near Morkthog's lair, which is like near the bridge extract. Um, uh, that area for some reason had some performance issues. I think it was like shadows inside the layer, and so we've addressed that. And so that should improve things. And then in terms of like improving combat mechanics, one thing I just talked with some of the combat team yesterday, and so just adding more and more improvements to like UX and presentation, for example, like have a universal sound when you crit or like when you down somebody and these sort of things. And then just improving and polishing the animation timings to make them snappier and have weight and that sort of thing. A lot of it is just there's no like one big thing. It's just all individual like little improvements, which that's like one of the most fun things to do. And so yeah, kind of really icing the cake these days on that. And then when it comes to fixing issues with cheesing bosses, one of the things that we did was put like volumes that if you try to pull a boss or a creature out of an area to try to cheese it or something, we made it like leash back. That's been somewhat successful, but there are individual things, for example with Morkthog, that you can kind of cheese him in certain areas, and so we're hammering out those issues as best we can. And then later in during EA development, we'll get a lot more sophisticated and spend a lot more energy and time on AI in general to make it more sophisticated. It's cool that I think the AI and the creatures have had such a are been super well received. In the very beginning of the project, we actually didn't really plan for having as large of a beast share that we have because we kind of thought it'd be mostly PvP, but it's actually really added a cool dynamic to the game that I think a lot of people like, especially for newer players, just kind of on board on the combat system. But yeah, so that's something we plan on spending a lot more time with. And then I think, I just did an interview with some of the traditional media. I think it was PC Gamer or Games Radar or something. And I kind of mentioned, kind of the long term vision, and we'll have another show where we talk about the long term vision of Legacy, the IP. But I've been very careful to say the game's not really an MMO, and because I don't really I worked on MMO, and many of the team have worked on MMOs a lot in the past, and so we're very, it's like, well, there's a certain list of things that we expect the game to have, but when you think about Legacy, it has a lot more MMO features than it's more MMO than not in a lot of ways. It has like classes, has leveling, has art. We're gonna have like more rich character customization in the future. And then different experiences that you can do, whether it's PvP or PvE. But right now we have just really the PvP VE experience. But in the future, we'd like to perhaps experiment with like, other PvE only maybe features as well. Could be interesting. It really just kind of depends on how the game does and like the feedback and like the vibes, I guess, of the community. But anyway, that was kind of a tangent, but it's just something I've been thinking a lot about recently.
Was welcomed, well received the tangent. I agree. I like that we have a lot more creatures in our bestiary now, especially since I believe a few weeks ago when we had like almost tripled them because we have like elite versions and then different variety. I don't even think they're all in the map yet. I think there's still a few that we haven't really put in the map. But yeah, that's awesome. I think that's great. And then the last question that we have prepared, and then by the way, guys, you can raise your hand and I'll invite you on stage so you can ask Chris questions yourself. What can we expect post EA? Yeah, so I think you were kind of alluding to this, like maybe a long-term plan, or
Right. Yeah. So one thing I was just kind of updating it earlier today is the roadmap that we have for the game, and post EA or sorry, during early access. Or I guess this says post EA. Actually, this meant to say post or during EA. But anyway, during early access, is basically probably going to be like 12 months or so, I would say at least. And during that time, we'll introduce the last remaining two classes, which is the Wizard and Paladin, and then several other different maps into the game. One that we've talked about is the farm, and then there's a larger, what we call epic map, which is a whole different, larger zone with a whole different kit that's called Karth that we have in there, which is sort of like the Warriors zone. And then there's other different features to the lodge. One that we introduced this wipe or this alpha, it was the ossuary. It had some bugs that we're ironing out, but basically that one is just a way to turn in player kill tokens as well as just like other monster parts, and then you get like a reputation bonus with the vendors. But there's some others that we want to introduce, which is like one's like a transmutation device where you put some items in there and then another item spits out like basically maybe semi, not random, but anyway, there will be like a whole kind of thing with that thing. And then also the safe. The safe is used to put some items, and then it will persevere through the wipe. And that will be like really the end game kind of module or the furnishing in the lodge that players will care about between wipes. And then so there's that, and then we have an arena map which we've had in some of the alpha playtests that has usually pretty well received. We want to build a whole kind of system around it as well, and so that's another thing that we would put in EA as well. So anyway, there's a whole content roadmap plan that we have that we'll share into Discord if anyone hasn't seen it. And we'll be updating that with more things. We don't want to unveil everything just because we want to have some sort of secrets. But in the future, Meet the Devs will be talking more in depth. One I'm excited about doing is one on the wizard, where we kind of go through his mechanics and spells, and maybe kind of like get some live feedback from players on how some mechanics there. But yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, so that's the end for the Q&A that we had prepared. So now we can invite people on stage. Guys, if you want to ask questions, I'm going to invite you right now. We have Katrikan with a question. Hello.
Hello there. Long time no see.
Long time no see.
Okay. Chris, last time I gave you a very juicy question about this Naxxramas boss-like PvE. I did try very hard to find something, breaking idea of proposing that you could potentially maybe invest in the game, this PvE VP mode. But I did come up with something a little more, less of value, so to say. So I'm going to ask you this one, and if I have time, I will ask you the second, so that others can have the time to ask the questions as well. So here we go. The first question I would like to ask is something that I missed from last dev interview because I couldn't catch it. Something that troubles me is that some weapons have a block stat. Will there be a parry mechanic like Elden Ring or blocking with weapons themselves, or is that something that will be removed?
Yeah, the rogue with the swords has a parry. So it does have a block, but if you perfect block, basically a perfect parry, it does do a parry. Andre could explain that one, but we kind of did that one as an experiment on the rogue. The reason why we've been reluctant to kind of add parries to everything or throughout the whole game is just because it is a networked game, and so online multiplayer, and so you really have to make sure that when you push the button that the event happens, especially if the game or combat's going to be balanced around assuming the player will parry. And so we kind of wanted to see how the sword one went, if it feels responsive or that sort of thing. Maybe it's something we could explore more. But so we're not like philosophically against it. We just want to make sure if we're going to add it, it's going to be a good experience and responsive. So that's kind of my thought on parry. And then sorry, what was the other part of the question?
No. It's. I'll leave the second question for later, so that others can have a go to ask their stuff. Let's just stick to
Okay.
the parry thing.
Yeah.
Is it a parry or timing parry, or is it just as a block, like when you right click and the weapon blocks some attacks?
Right. Yeah. Maybe Andre, you wanted to describe it?
Yeah, sure. So for the rogue, like Chris said, we did experiment with a perfect block or a perfect parry, where when you press block, you have I think it's 0.5 second window in which if you were to take damage in that window but you block the damage, then you can do like a counterattack. And like Chris
Right.
said, there was some worry that the 0.5 seconds on your machine might not match with the 0.5 seconds on the other person's machine, so it might get desynced. So
Right.
that's kind of like the experiment we're having. Yeah, sorry. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
No. I'm just
Oh, okay.
just listening. Sorry.
But I think you were also asking about the Elden Ring style, where almost every weapon you can just use it as a block, right? Am I right? Is that what you're asking?
Basically, yeah. As Chris said, it's an online game. Elden Ring can be played solo, so it's a completely different thing where you parry a boss's attack because the timing is crucial. But if the bandwidth is different between the two players, then it can mess up with the servers or whatever. So, someone presses
Yeah.
their parry and they miss it because they lag or whatever. So I understand that the parry system can be tricky in an online game. So let's just stick to the fact of blocking as a basic mechanic, just like when you have a shield,
Hmm.
with a great axe. Now that the death bolt is somewhat broken, literally, great axe is getting somewhat overshadowed. Maybe great axe could have something like that. There are other weapons like Valheim, for example, where the battle axe shines when it blocks even troll attacks. Maybe great axe will have something like that.
Chris, you want to take that, or do you want me to take that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think at some point, very early in development, the Great Axe had block too, and then we took it off because we wanted to make it feel different than the Mace and Shield. And so the Wrecking Ball, we put block back on there again as another experiment to kind of see how that would feel. And yeah, I like that it feels like the Great Axe, but then with block. you're right that I think we have to make sure that the axe has a purpose and doesn't completely overshadow it. I think kind of the wrecking ball probably its damage was a little bit high, and so we probably will tone that down a little bit. We kind of let it go for this build because we did want people to play it to kind of get experience it.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll look at that, and there's more ways I think we can also make the axe feel better. One thing with the axe is just that compared to the death ball is that while the death ball has this mid-range mechanic to it, so when you use the Q or the technical attack or the press and hold the right and left click, so that is really great for the warrior, and then it has a lot of protected unblockable attacks and stuff like that. So those are its perks. But then what the great axe has is just that it has a lot more AOE. So it has a lot more of it's a forgiving hit shape of a half circle, and so that's what the great axe should feel good at. Is like if you're fighting multiple goblins, if you're fighting multiple players at once, like that should feel deadly. Probably have to do some tuning there to make sure that feels that way. Another thing with the Great X too that I'd love to do during the early access is just give it a better attack on the Q, or change the Q or the press and hold, because they feel very similar, like the whirlwinds. We have a lot of crazier ideas that we could juice those up.
If I can
Time.
stop you right there, Chris, sorry, do not go too deep about the axe. I will ask you again later about the axe because I have a question about it. I just want you to know about the
Okay.
blocking for now. You covered me. I'll just leave the stage for the next one, and we can talk about the axe later. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. If you just let me go, I'll just keep going.
All right, big answer. So we have Zio Matrix with a question as well. Hello, sir.
I noticed that there's no, player tags among, when you're playing the game, you don't see a name of who you're fighting. And with the guild system coming later, is there a way, or do you guys have a plan for building player animosity? So, like, if you see someone with a guild tag or their name or some way of finding out who you're about to kill is someone that you don't like, or if they're dangerous because you fought them before and you're like, oh no, let me run, or is there going to be like a screen that when you do die, you can see who killed you or see who you killed or something like that?
Yes, yeah. We've been improving the UI, like the just the art of it and the placement and stuff. Before, you used to see like who killed you and like who you killed, and so we do want to retain that and bring that back. It's totally possible. It's just like we have to do the work there. And so yeah, you should be able to see who killed you and then who you killed. Um, and we also want to build upon that in the future. One thing I'd love to do is have these have these like banners that you place in players after you kill them, right? And then for other players who run through the map, they could probably click the banner and see like who killed them and whatever. And that banner could be associated with you as the player, right? And those could be customized. Anyway, a lot of stuff that we don't have on deck just yet, but there are a lot of ideas that we have there to create that, like all these kind of social things, so other players are there and you have some sort of calling card sort of thing. Yeah, love that. Something that we definitely want to do.
That sounds awesome because I remember seeing you guys in the wilds on Twitch, and I was just like, "Oh, right, it's Notorious. All right, we're gonna be in for a fight."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. I love that.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Good question.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Actually, Mel was suggesting, and I think we spoke about this before. Maybe ears should show the names of the person they belong to when you loot the ear, so you could like collect the rarest ears in the game or something. But anyway, we have another
Yeah.
question from Blackbeard, who can't join the stage but asked me to ask whether the rogue will get a third weapon for early access or not for early access. Because I think the rogue might be.
Will they get the third weapon?
Yeah, I think the rogue might be our last class that is missing a third weapon. And we did say that he is getting a third weapon at some point. Is it going to be ready for early access or no?
Yeah, we have designs on it. We're working on it right now. It won't make it for early access, unfortunately, but we'll be in one of the earlier patches for sure. Yeah. Right now we call it the Scorpion Tail. So try to think about what that could mean. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, people are going to start asking questions now. Okay, speaking of questions, we have a Swanifier here, Swanifier himself, with a question.
My question is mantling intended to break fall damage?
You mean like when you're falling, you just like run to a wall and you like mantle mid fall?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't love that. Ideally, you shouldn't be able to kind of do that. I think though it's kind of interesting and fun that you can do that in certain circumstances. I wouldn't say it's like intended, like we intended to do it that way, but it's kind of there for now. I have some ideas on how you could polish that so that you do jump down from one wall to another and climb up, kind of like it's like the game's Assassin's Creed or something. That is cool. I think that's like a little platforming thing. But I think if you're jumping down and you're falling for like 5 seconds or something like that from the highest point in the game and you mantle on something, that seems goofy. So maybe what we could do is say, hey, if you've been falling for a while, you can't do that. But if you've been falling for just a short moment, you can. So that's probably something we would do. Just we haven't had time to do that just yet.
Yeah, it seems like a really cool mechanic if it was intended, or if you guys kept it in the game, because like it feels kind of OP that priests are the only design class that can just play without gravity. But if it was kept, it would add like a really cool skill expression on like playing on high ground and jumping off.
Yeah, I have a lot of wish lists for some of these things. Like it'd be cool if rogues could run on walls or something like that. But we,
I don't know about
can't do
that.
that just yet. Yeah.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. All right, we got one here from Wicked Fool, who again can join, but wants me to ask, are there going to be subclasses and/or specializations after the existing class traits? So I guess a warrior that can pick some sort of traits to like path more towards a wizard or something else like that.
Yeah, I think the one thing we love about classes is that they're sort of distinct and they have their own sort of identities and their own sort of like strengths and weaknesses. I think having very distinct classes is something we care a lot about. That said, I think it could be cool to add more builds, more build diversity to the game. Maybe that means like more items or more item slots potentially, or like some other kind of true talent system rather than the traits that we have, which are not really talents. The talents really are in the game right now, and what you create the builds with is supposed to be the items, so your armor and weapons and ranks. But we could do another layer of that. We kind of have to I'd like to see the game breathe a bit more and kind of see more of the end game and kind of see how that feels first before adding a system like that. But not philosophically against it. It's just yeah. But I do think builds are important. Feeling like your warrior is different from another warrior is important. So
Yeah, and he's asking on top of that exactly that. Like he was thinking about talents that you have to pick and choose, where you can't unlock all of them. But that's what perks are. That's what the gear is. The gear system is there to facilitate that kind of personalization. All right, next we got Katrikan here again with, I guess, a follow-up question. So get ready to talk about the axe, I suppose. Here he comes.
Hello again.
Hi.
Yeah, to your statement, Amboni, honestly, if there are others who have questions, I can go last again. No rush. Another question before we go to the axes, if you have the time, again, we will talk about that. I want to close this because I've been thinking about it and I see it all around me and I need an answer. The question is, there are several bodies of water in the game, Chris. Some of those bodies of water have piers, docks, or similar look fishing huts nearby, although they are not fishing huts. Wouldn't be that is also one of my questions on the survey. Are you planning on expanding our cooking repertoire with fish, corn from fields and stuff?
Oh, so the question is, do we plan on expanding cooking?
Basically, yes. And like generally speaking, yes. Are you planning on adding more food to the chain? And specifically, will there be some sort of a fishing mechanic to the game?
Yeah, I thought you were gonna ask, are you gonna have boats? But
No, that's too much.
yeah.
I can understand the development, so we'll just leave that for maybe after a year or something.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I like fishing mechanics for sure. Without, I'm not against, again, not against it philosophically. It just depends on, if it takes precedent in the roadmap and over other progression features, that sort of thing. One thing with fishing though, of course, is it's kind of really like a chill mechanic, it's not like really let's go in a hardcore PvP zone and fish, But so I'd be curious if like, is it like you fish, like you throw like a fishing pole into a body of water? Or is it more like,
I can
hardcore
give you
fishing where you
my.
just punch the fish and loot it?
Anyway, that was about
Got it.
the
Yeah,
fishing
that's a good
thing.
idea.
All right. I'm gonna step off now, and if you guys have time again, I'm gonna come back again and ask you something else. Thanks.
Sure, thanks for the question. I want to fight with the fishing pole. I want it to be a weapon with skills. And we have a question, speaking of fighting, from Mr. Shady. And he's asking, is there any vision for organized PvP, like tournaments, arena-style matches, or other symmetric PvP for the future? We also had in the previous playtest, not this one, for a couple of, I think for a day, we turned on like a 3v3 mode, a deathmatch mode. So maybe he's referring to that, like what are the plans with that?
Yeah, it's something that we used to turn on every alpha playtest because it gave us like a good way to test class balance and combat and stuff like that. Still very useful for that reason. So yeah, we do have this on a roadmap of doing like a arena deathmatch mode. We do want to be mindful about the mode though, and think about like what are the incentives, what is the reward structure, how does it work, what is the matchmaking, is it rounds, is it like a medaling system, is it a tournament? So we do have some ideas there that we'll probably share in the future, but yeah, like the idea a lot. And we already have the arena map made, actually. Colin and the team have made something for that. So yeah, it's just a question about us finding the time to put that system in there and making sure we do all the work to make it the best experience.
Yeah, awesome. We have one more question here for Mr. Obajiba, and he's asking, what are your thoughts on the current state of the game and it going into early access? Do you think the game will be well received as early access team in its current state? So I guess, yeah, how do we feel about the state of the game going into early access? Are we happy with it? Do we wish we had more time? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, good question. I have a bunch of thoughts. One thought, usually when they ask me this question, is like, how do I feel? And actually, I was, I think any game that releases, or even whether it's early access or like some gold master release, is sort of a miracle, because game development is so hard, especially right now, like in this market time. Making games is pretty challenging for a multitude of reasons. But I think the first alpha test that we did, or first friends and family one, I think we did, I felt more at unease and nervous and stuff then, because we didn't quite know like how the core experience, how the game would resonate, these sort of things, would it work, etc. So, but now I feel pretty good about it because every playtest we do gets better and better, and then result, you guys in the surveys say, the game is improving. So I'm happy about that. So I feel pretty good. It's always a question of like, when is the right time to release a game or even to early access. I think the intent of early access is that you get to a point where the core experience, the core loop, the like meat there is there. Maybe not all the content is created. Maybe that there's extra features that you could add, but the kind of core of the game is sort of there. And then the rest of it, when you add more content, when you're tuning, once you're adding other features, the benefit of it being in early access is that you have the community, you have other players there to help you, learn and develop the game. And I think early access, I have friends who, won't buy a game if it's in early access because they just want to wait until it's fully completed. And I understand that. But I actually think for like multiplayer online, especially PvP games like ours, it's like so critical. Even if you're going to release a game in Gold Master, if you notice like many AAA studios who release it and then boom, like the next month or weeks or something like that, they do all these patches to tune things and update stuff. Because yeah, it's really impossible really to develop a game that's intended to be live without some sort of something like an early access. So yeah, we are kind of a smaller studio as well, and so it makes perfect sense, I think, for us at this moment to kind of release the game early access. There's a bit of other features and content I would have loved to be in early access, but I think it's totally in a good, decent spot now. And keep in mind, you guys are all very kind of good gamers and hardcore and these sort of things, so you can blow through the content or get epics or whatever very quickly. But the average player, there's a good amount of content there, and then we have a whole content plan to introduce more and more things over time, what we were talking about earlier. So but anyway, yeah, feeling pretty good, pretty excited. And it used to be in game development, you build something and then you release it, and then it was like this whole thing. Whereas now I think it's more iterative and it's just another chapter, I think, and yeah, anyway, that's how I think about it.
All right, good answer. And then segueing from the fact that you said, our playtesters are kind of no-lifers and they burn through content really fast. We have a question from Infernox, who is saying, a question from a loot goblin. Is there going to be changes for early access in terms of loot drops? And he's saying that gated at purple and very, very hard to craft. So as we said before, Greenwood is kind of our medium tier map where it's really difficult for you to get past blue. You can get into epics, but it's really difficult. Like the drops are just not there. So yeah, any plans on changing that, or do you think it's better to just keep it the way it is for the more casual players?
Yeah, I think there's more room to go, more gameplay content to add that would make, the journey between two blues and epics and two eventually legendaries feel more like an actual real journey rather than some sort of grind. I would say it's a little grindy right now, but we're working a little bit on smoothing that out. And then we'll add more and more content and experiences to make those feel like they have their own home. You mentioned something like Greenwood as sort of this mid-tier map and that sort of thing. And we have this intention of creating the farm map, and it's like more of a, maybe more entry-level map. And then we can just kind of shift some of the early level stuff from Greenwood to there and then juice up Greenwood or these sort of things. So, I agree. Like right now, it's a little bit of there's not uh, a lot of gameplay towards rare and epic and then legendary items just yet. But over time, they'll be a lot more fleshed out. And so we're super excited about that. One thing as well is Morgthog, the encounter. We've been spending some energy on him and making that like feel like a true exciting encounter that you feel like you gear up to. And there's some, strategy and tactics too, and these sort of things. It's only just the beginning. We're going to do a lot more of that as well in the future in different maps. And so making that feel like a really great encounter and something that you're achieving and you're grinding up towards will feel good too. Lastly, one thing I would mention in the alpha is just that we've been kind of almost intentionally trying to keep the alphas kind of smaller because just not overwhelm us with in development. And because of that, the zones usually are a little lower populated than they would be normally. So that also contributes to the game feeling like you can progress pretty quickly because there's not as much threat. But once you fail to extract half the time or even 2/3 of the time or 1/3 of the time if you're a pretty decent player like many of you guys are, that will also affect progression and these sort of things. So yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add also that over time, even if we don't change it, over time, people, even players who don't play as much, will start getting more and more gear faster and faster, like it accelerates, because everyone, like all the sweats are getting gear faster, but then they're also dying. Like even Swanifier dies, eventually they will die, they will drop their gear, and then people can start collecting their stuff. And then for them, it's easier to craft the gear because they probably have the vendors leveled up and everything else. So the gear acquiring process does amplify and gets faster and faster. Okay, I'll invite Katrikan for one last question then. The closing question. Hetrican.
I get the closing question. Oh my
Yeah.
god, I have so many questions yet. I think I'm gonna close the first one that we started, Chris, you and I, with the Great Axe. So here's something that we can talk about. You said that the axe started, well, some weapons have the blocking, but they didn't make the cut about blocking at the end of the day. Um, Something that could make the axe unique, it doesn't have to be blocking. You could remove that stat completely from the weapon, since it has the heavy attack, which is also unique to it. Something that you could add to it is special abilities, passives, such as piercing armor, bleeding, or the ability to hook your opponent if they are in melee range. There is a weapon like that in New World. The Great Axe has an ability where basically your character leans forward and grabs your opponent that's in front of you, like let's say 6 meters, 8 meters, or whatever, and they grab them and they hook them towards you. Now, since the warrior already has a hooking ability, I don't see that really making the cut. So, but the other two abilities, it's still food for thought, right? The other two passives would basically make the weapon shine compared to the other two. The mace and the death ball. Something that would make it unique in its own way by granting it passives that would, maybe smooth out the fight versus a boss, or maybe prevent a rogue from going invisible if they're bleeding, something like that. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah. I mean, that's you know, those are all valid mechanics. I think that could be considered. One thing is, I actually think with the axe, I don't know if we still have this or if it's, I can't think right now, but the right click press and hold actually is, we name some of these things internally. Right now, we don't have it in the UI where you could see like what the different, like the evade attack is called, or the power attack on the left or right click, etc. But the right click one is called execute actually. And what it does is that if you press and hold and release it and do the damage on somebody, and if they die, they actually die. They don't like get downed.
That's
So
actually
it's
intended. I've seen that happen. I killed people like that. That's intended. It's not a bug.
it was by design.
Oh my god.
Yeah. But it might be too good or too goofy. But we are experimenting with things like this where like on the different move sets do different mechanics that are unique. But yeah, I think another one also does like a like on the mace and shield. If, by the way, if you block with that, it's supposed to be like a spike shield. So when you block and people attack you, they take damage. So it's like,
Very
a damage
small.
shield kind of thing.
Very
That's
cool.
another one. And then I think on the left click, if you press and hold, it does a slam and it does an armor reduction. So actually, all players do more damage to that target. So if you're tanking with the warrior and using the mace power attack, you keep this debuff on the ogre or the boss or whoever it is, and everybody's doing more damage to that target. I think it's like it's not maybe a lot, but it is something. And so, anyways, we're playing around with a lot of these little buffs and debuffs and mechanics on the weapons, and so probably see a lot more of that in the future. And I think once you get in the UI and stuff, then everybody will kind of know that these things exist.
Right, because exactly that's something else that we will leave that for maybe another time. The fact of not knowing what debuffs are active on the target. I didn't know that the mace would reduce the target's armor. I didn't know that because there was no such thing on the UI. I don't know if you guys have more time. The time is up as well. Anyway, thanks Chris for all your answers on my 3 questions, and I really hope you guys fare well in the early access. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you for the questions, of course, as always. And yeah, I think we're at time. We do have a couple more questions.
Santa Cruz was asking about South American servers, and yeah, we over time we were going to be, the goal is to add more servers at different regions, and then also localizations of the game. And so right now the game is just in English, but then we're going to have Chinese and other languages in the game at some point as well. So yeah.
All right, we got one more person that raised their hands a while ago. I'll just quick question, okay? One last.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah.
Good. I just wanted to do a quick question for the house banners. So in fantasy and medieval fantasy, I think house banners are really iconic and really cool. So I was wondering if we'd have more options at early access launch for like our house sigils and customizing our banner and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we kind of neglected a bit that we do want to update. And so it's just a question, whether the artist on the team, I see Cole's in here, how fast he could draw, I guess, of adding some of these to the game, because I'm totally down for it. We also talked about doing a special one for those of you who were in the alpha, unique one. So there's that intention too. So
Oh,
Really cool.
uh-oh.
Thank
What do
you.
what do you want me to do now? What is
yeah,
what is this, Chris?
yeah. It's a new task for you to update the sigils.
We also want to. I'm gonna hijack. That's right.
Yeah.
We also want to do like even on the wood part, you'll be able to customize like the different ends and have skulls hanging off, do all that kind of
Nice.
that cool stuff along with the sigils, so your whole banner kind of just changes. So
Nice.
just a matter of how much my carpal tunnel settles into my hand, pretty much, and time.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay, there you go.
There it is. Well, thank you for the questions, everybody. Thank you for your time, Chris. And yeah, once again, early access, February 12th. Mark the date on your calendar. Closing
No, I
time.
just want to say thanks to everybody who participated in all the alpha playtests. It was super critical for us, and it was a really highlight of the last, all these years working on the game to just see all of you playing. There's so many of us who, fell asleep watching you guys stream the game. It's been so much fun. So, really want to send all my appreciation for that, and yeah, look forward to bringing this thing to early access and then adding all this other content and stuff that we talked about. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I'll see you guys next week then. Have a beautiful rest of the day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.